Hi, everybody. Jack Wheeler, alcoholic. You know, the reality is that this is one of what we're going to talk about in this session is some of the most incredible work I've ever done in my life. I was terrified of it. It didn't make any sense to me. You know, and it's experiential here. We have a pragmatic program of action. And when I say that, it's simple to do. And I think the inventory process is one of those things that, for me, it was overbilled. There was a lot of hype on it. And when I say that, I think sometimes I can use it as a method to manage my own life. And I have to be careful of those things. I can remember Tim and I were leading a group out in Colorado, a step group, taking a group of men and women through the steps. And I was on my way down to meet Tim and get ready for the evening group, and I called Bob. And I said to Bob, I said, Bob, if you're going to tell me how to write a fourth step and direct me to write a fourth step, how many columns would there be? What would it look like? Because mine and Bob's relationship is one of a conversation that's just been ongoing since he's been my sponsor. He's never given me directions to write this way. He shares his experience with things with me, and I kind of copy him. And it's been really cool. But I called him up and I said, what would the directions you give me be if you told me to write a fourth step and do it this way? And he said, Jack, that's a bad question. And I'm thinking to myself, well, that sucks. And he said, you just want to be right. And he was right. I wanted somebody to give me the secret handshake, the right code, I wanted him to tell me what was right. And I can tell you that I'm the guy. I have shown up at my sponsor's house after writing my life story. I have done 3-column inventories. I've done 5-column inventories. I've done 4. I've done so many different things. And I could even take you through the book and show you where a lot of that stuff lines up with it. It says in there that a man needs to know your entire life story. Sounds like you should write your life story. That's what it sounds like to me. So I can go through the book and show you where it's 4 columns. I go through the book and I can show you the example that Bill did is 3 columns. And we get so hung up on the technicalities of this thing. I'm telling you right now, this isn't a technical journey. It's a spiritual journey. We get there a lot of different ways. And I don't know what's effective in your life right now, but that's what you should be doing, is what's effective. And the journey here I'm not trying to add anything. I'm trying to get unblocked. It's a journey of subtraction. It's a journey of removal. And if you have asked me to sponsor you and take you through the work today you're going to be writing a 6-column inventory, because I found that to be the most effective. And I can show you where it lines up with the book. I have it numbered in my book, 1 through 6. These are the columns we're going to write. And I'm not saying that's the correct way to do it. I'm saying that I just told you I could show you that the book shows you a 3-column inventory as well. But what I've found to be most effective for me is a 6-column inventory. And I don't want to get caught up in the technicalities of the conversation this morning. What's that?
It's too late.
Fuck. Shit. All right, I'm going to tell you what the columns are. And before I do that, I think one of the greatest directions in the book on the fourth step is in this paragraph. Therefore, we started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsellable goods to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. I think that sentence is one of the most incredible sentences in the directions, because I kid myself about values. You know, I'm caught up in things that are meaningless, and I can't see it, you know, because I fool myself about values of things in my life. You know, there's times where I think the most important thing is what truck I'm driving. I like the smell of new leather. And the shine always wears off, the smell always goes away. You know, but I kid myself about it, you know, still today. So this is an ongoing process for me. It's not one and done. The first column is we listed people, institutions, or principles with whom we were angry. That's column 1. Who you pissed off at? We can do it on a bar stool. We're pretty current when we roll in the doors of Alcoholics Anonymous, who we're pissed off at, right? We asked ourselves why we were angry. In most cases, we found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including why are you angry with them? You know, what happened? That's column 2. Column 3 is what did it affect? Did it affect your self-esteem, your pocketbook, your ambition, your personal relations, including sex? Why were you burned up? You know, those things are the first 3 columns. I'm just setting the stage. Every one of us can answer that question today. Pissed off at somebody? Why? How did it affect you? The fourth column is a piece of work in this book from 66 to 67 that I believe we're supposed to be, when we finish this piece of work, when I finish this piece of work, I am no longer in resentment. By column 4, I'm no longer in resentment. It tells us we realize the people who wronged us were perhaps spiritually sick. Though we did not like their symptoms and the way they disturbed us, they, like ourselves, were sick too. And we pray the prayer. You know, we ask God to help me be different. You know, God to help us show them the same tolerance, pity, and patience we would cheerfully grant a sick friend. When a person offended, we said this to ourselves: this is a sick man, how can I be helpful to him? God, save me from being angry, thy will be done. If you're still angry after that, praying that prayer, after considering how you're like them, I can put myself in the offender's position easily. I've done it. Most of the time, I have done it to other people, the same exact thing. And when I come from that place of compassion and empathy, and I start understanding that they're being driven by something just like I'm being driven by something, and I'm that guy, the resentment just vanishes. And I don't think we can do the last columns in resentment. I think that it says, before what I read, it says this is how we mastered it. We had to master these things by doing this. And when I come to that place where the resentment's gone, I understand that the reality of the situation for once in my life. The resentment's gone. And that's column 4. How am I like them? You know, it's a key piece of information for me to walk through it. And it's a key piece of that work that we do from 66 to 67. We call it the sick man's prayer. I'm the sick man. I always said it like they're the sick man, you know. And I think that the resentment vanishes. I'm standing on the same soil they are. And then we roll into column 5. In column 5, it says in here, Putting out of our minds the wrongs others had done. We resolutely look for our own mistakes. I think Tim and I counted one time. Right now it's going to go into 8 times where it tells us to not think about them anymore. The resentment's gone. I don't have, all of a sudden I'm looking at me. I'm looking in the mirror. You know, and it says, so the 5th column is where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened. Not if you were self-seeking. Where? Write it down. What happened?
To back me up, the 4th column is the signature?
Yep.
Okay.
And column 6, it says, referring to our lists again, it says, referring to our list again, where we've been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, or frightened, those situations had not been entirely our fault. We tried to disregard the person. Where were we to blame? Another question. What was my faults? You know, all of a sudden in column 6, I'm looking at me. Only me. And for a guy like me to just look at my mistakes, my faults, where I was to blame, that's something I'm not good at that. My ego wants me looking at you. You know, and this brings us to a place where I can finally look at who I really am. What's the truth about the stock in trade? Who am I? And I get to see the truth of myself. You know, and it's funny because the 6 columns, I was listening to a recording of Sheldon, and he wasn't even talking about the 4-step. He was talking to a crew of guys down in Arizona, and he said, I don't know what you write. I don't know if you write 4 column, 5 column. The way I read the book, it's 6 columns. And I got the book out because I'd never done a 6 column inventory, and I want to be right. And I started looking through the book, and I couldn't put it all together, and I sat down. I saw Sheldon at Usual Suspects, and I said, I want to go sit down with you and talk about something. He said, okay. We went and smoked a cigar, and we sat there and we talked, and there was a crew of us in the gazebo there, and he went through this, and it changed everything for me. You know, and I had some time in the game at that time, but you know, I start looking at how am I like them. You know, all of a sudden we're on equal footing. We're on the same soil. And so it's a 6 column inventory that I write today.
Summarize the last 3 again. Sick man's prayer.
4 is how am I like them, the sick man's prayer. 5 is where had we been selfish, dishonest, self-seeking, and frightened. And 6 is where was I to blame and what were my faults. And it's a process. I don't know if that's right or wrong. I know it's what I do and it's effective. You know, and I know the feedback I've gotten from the guys I sponsor and the guys I've taken through the work has been pretty magnificent. But it's funny. We want to be correct, right? My ego says I got to be right. And I can't, every time we do a group and we take somebody through this, they come back and say, well, how am I like the IRS? And I'm just like, if it doesn't fit, don't write it. You know, that's the journey here. You know, how many times has a guy called you and said, I can't figure out where I'm at fault, what my mistakes were. Okay, don't write it. We'll get to that as we go through. Just keep going. You know, leave it blank. You know, it doesn't all have to fit in this perfect box here. That's the beauty of this thing. It's spiritual, not technical. And I can tell you that while I've had some trouble figuring out what my mistakes were, my sponsor has never had a problem figuring out what my mistakes are. The guys I run with have never had a problem figuring out what my mistakes are. And you want to talk about 4 or you want me to keep going?
Keep going till you're done.
Okay. That's a setup. You know, so what I can tell you, so what I'm saying is when you get to that part in the book where it says we start writing, start writing. You know, if you need help, it's there. You know, you're not walking this path alone. We're going to share our experience with you. Just keep writing. You know, if you get hung up, show up and talk to your sponsor, talk to the guys you run with, talk to some guys that have some skin in the game, And you can't do it wrong. And step 5, I want to read something. Charlie Parker was a good friend of mine, and when I first met him, he gave me this writing, and he talked about it a lot more than before he gave me the writing. He caught my interest up. He said, when we have men in our lives that we have spiritual consent with. And I, it sounded cool, so I'm parroting it at the meetings I'm running around at. And we sat down, Charlie and I sat down, we talked about it. I said, what the hell does that actually mean? We run around here and say we hold each other accountable, and at some level that's really true. But at the same time, I'm not getting in your face about something that I don't want you to talk to me about. Isn't that the way we are? Bob said it last night. We train people what's okay to talk to us about. And Charlie gave me this writing that he did after we had talked about it. It says, spiritual consent was one of the first tools taught to me by my sponsor, Mark Houston. The idea of spiritual consent is that I'm giving you the right to call me on any behavior that you see me exhibiting, whether it hurts my feelings or not. We'd rather step on your toes than stand on your grave. One has to formally establish spiritual consent with another. The considerations are always given in the spirit of love and compassion. Brutal honesty will not fit the bill. With these comments, we try to follow the path of consideration. We try for the comments to begin with, is that possible? I'd like to offer for your consideration that. This method seems to effectively get past our defense mechanisms. And when we got to that part in the writing, Charlie talked to me about our defense mechanisms. We are so defended. We are naturally defended. I'm not talking to you about that. I don't want you to talk to me about that. The defense mechanisms are automatic. It's the way we're wired. The last key element of the method is that when one is offered a consideration, the only response allowed is simply thank you, or thanks, I'll take that under consideration. This keeps the ego from going into self-defense mode. If one is allowed to respond to a consideration, the only thing we're going to get is the ego trying to defend itself by telling you how you are looking at it all wrong. This usually comes with a long explanation or story. You got some long explanations or stories? Responses to considerations need to come the next day or at our next gathering of the group. I have a clear memory of calling Mark one day to report another member's outrageous behavior at a meeting and how I should approach him. Mark asked, do you have spiritual consent with him? I said, well, no. To which he replied, then it's none of your business. Tough concept to accept from me. I'd always operated under the theory of, if not me, who? Mark was big on a position of neutrality in many matters. Having spiritual consent with a small group or with another individual is a powerful tool for growth. It is an honor to be given spiritual consent from another. Avoid sarcasm and silliness at all costs. The tool can greatly aid us in our quest to grow in understanding and effectiveness. Charlie P., 2012. The fifth step, I know God's in the room, but it looks like it's just me and you. I'm letting somebody into the gray area, man. I'm letting somebody into the place where I'm not letting anybody. I'm sitting down with another man and bearing my soul. And the cool thing is, the most incredible thing that happens is that man did the same thing to me. I let him know some things. The first few times I did it, when the skeletons were coming out of the closet at that time, he said, oh, I did that too. He said, I did this. He made me feel like we were on equal footing. It wasn't that uniqueness that will kill me. And when that happens, my defense mechanisms go down. All of a sudden, I'm vulnerable to the truth. I'm vulnerable to the intimacy that I think is paramount to us walking this journey successfully. It starts with things like this spiritual consent. There's guys in this room, a lot of them, that have spiritual consent with me. You know, it's not one guy, you know, because I can tell you there'll be times I'll pick up the phone to call Bob and he won't answer. You know, and I'll call Tim or I'll call Mike or I'll call these guys that I run with. And that's the magic here. And we formalize the steps, you know. I'm on step 5. I need to be sitting in a room, knee to knee with a guy. And I'm telling you that if you stick around here long enough, and I hope you do, the numbers will fall off the steps. And it becomes the way we live. It becomes who we are. That transformation that happened is just, it changes everything. And I can do a 5th step with a guy that God just puts in my life. I run into him. And I can share that piece of business that needs to be out there in the sunlight. So the formalness of the steps is very important, don't get me wrong. But at some point, when you got guys in your life that you have spiritual consent with, that would rather hurt your feelings than stand on your grave, everything changes. The numbers fall off the steps. I'm not trying to do a 10th step. I'm not trying to do a 5th step. I'm just in it with God and you. And that's the magic. I've had that experience, I can't tell you how many times, where I've sat down with a guy and all of a sudden that thing that I've been keeping in the dark is in the sunlight. And I can tell you I'm stunned that I tried to hide it for so long. You know how hard it is to hide some of the shit we do? From your wife, from your kids, from the guys that you work with. Guys you're seeing all the time at your home group. And you got that one thing you just don't want out there in the sunlight. You know, I talked about it when I started. There's stuff that's going on for a lot of guys I know because life's in session for me. And there's hard stuff that comes up. You know, I shared, you know, I don't know how to, I never had to take care of my parents. It's tough. I've stumbled. I don't want you guys to see me stumble. You know, I can remember I was talking to Bob one day. I said, you know, I'm going out of town, and I feel bad because I'm glad I'm going out of town because my parents are staying home. Think about that. I'm happy I'm getting the hell out of there. And I feel bad that I feel that way. I don't want to tell that to you, that I feel glad I'm not going to be around to help my parents this weekend. I'm glad I don't have to go up and change my mom's meds or, you know, deal with their confusion of the day. But that's who I am, you know. And I shared that, and I found out that a lot of guys felt the same way and felt bad about it. And they said, don't feel bad about it. Go and come back, you know. And we get to show up for things like that. And that's the promise of the 5th step, is that I'm not unique. You know, and that's just the current stuff that's going on. I could go down through a list of things that I didn't want you guys to know about me. In the rooms of Alcoholics Anonymous, active member of Alcoholics Anonymous, sponsoring a crew of guys. And I'm not telling you that one thing. And then I do, because that's what the program teaches me. You know, that's what my experience tells me to do. That's what your experience tells me to do. And I do it. And we sit and we tell guys that how great it is, you know. And I said yesterday that to me, I thought the 4-step directions were horseshit because I was terrified of it. Today, I'm in love with the process. It is part of who I am. You know, if there's something that needs, some piece of spiritual business that needs to be addressed, I got the tools, man. They wrote the directions down for us. There's a section in the book, I don't remember, it's page 26 or 27, that talks about, you know, When it's talking about Roland and Dr. Young says, Roland's at that point, man, what do I do? Has anything ever worked? And Young, one of the smartest guys on the human psyche on the planet at the time, says, yeah, every now and then, once in a while, we have this phenomenon where somebody has this spiritual rearrangement. Young's calling it a phenomenon. He said, I've been trying to do it with you, Roland, but I haven't had any luck. And I haven't had much luck with alcoholics of your type. Had no idea. That's not the case anymore. They wrote the directions down. Now we know exactly what to do. We have the path. And we won't do it. We're terrified of it. I think it's hilarious now because today it's different. Today I have experienced it. I know it's true. For me, it is the only thing that ever worked. Step 6.
No. We'll get into 6 and 7 after.
Okay. Yes, sir.
Bob, alcoholic. One of the things that Howard talked about in the sex inventory he felt was an appropriate place to examine the other compulsions in our lives, gambling, money spending, all the sorts of things that, can escape. So many of the guys early in the process, I think, used the 4th and the 5th step kind of like a job interview. How much information do I have to give without screwing up my opportunity to get the job? We have no idea how defended we are. And we don't have great insight into what we're defending because we're looking at the consequences. We really don't get in touch with the causes and conditions until we start to use it in our lives. As our lives are expanding, if we're about this process appropriately. And as your lives expand, you are not prepared for the newness of your life. And you bring your habits and you bring your normal reactions to that process. You bring the stuff that doesn't work, and you think it's the circumstances that you're dealing with. You think life's coming at you rather than from you. Later, when you discover both in your own life and when you discover with people that are a little further down the road than you, there are all sorts of people that are able to be in front of things that you can't be in front of at all and not be upset and be okay. One of the things that you start to learn about yourself is anytime, so when you're wrapped around the axle, upset, afraid, whatever the responses are, it isn't what's going on that's causing it. It's the story and interpretation you add to what's going on. So depending upon what your emotional content is, if your emotional content gets up above 5, your IQ drops in half. And yet that's one of the times we're trying to be most controlling and the loudest and in charge, because then we can somehow keep it at bay. It is, and we early on in the process have almost no experience with being quiet. We've got this gerbil track going on in our head. We're going to talk about meditation later. I'm no good at it. Well, why? Well, my mind won't, no one's mind stops. No one's mind, that's part of the biggest issue we have in this room, we call it self-centeredness, mind-boundness. We're bound in our minds. And our minds do not have the resolution. They do not have the solution. They have information. They may have some insight. But they aren't big enough or deep enough to bring you home, baby. You got to get into insight, and you got to get into spirit, and you got to get into a relationship with a God greater than yourself if you're really going to get your hands on the knobs and dials that make a difference in your life. And it takes some time to be able to just see it. I mean, you don't, I mean, how many of us in the room, the first inventory, my first inventory was like a third grade art project my mother put on the refrigerator. I mean, it was not, it was about my secrets. And, you know, at the time it was helpful and important to me, but it was, I did it with a priest, I did it like a general confession when the book talks about it. And it wasn't today what I would talk about. So both 4 and 5, and it doesn't seem like 6 and 7, but 4 and 5, 6 and 7, and 8 and 9 are the turning points of your life. They are, it isn't just 4 and 5 that's, you know, a seminal event. And it really is, it's, as Howard would talk about it, as a tall pole in the tent. So when I heard that Al-Anon person define, describe the steps, the first 3 are to give up, 4 and 5 are to own up, 6, 7, 8, and 9 are to clean up, and 10, 11, and 12 are to grow up. So clean up. Every time I tried to start my life over, I never cleared it out. I was still dragging around the garbage. I was still dragging around my viewpoint of life. I was still dragging around my assessment of myself. I was just locked in, and I experienced some freedom when I did that initial, not very great 4th and 5th step. I experienced some forgiveness, which was important to me. But little by slowly, over a period of time, it was that process of my first 8 years of sobriety and all the issues that I had in sobriety, where I started to take responsibility and have a more accurate assessment of who I was and what my issues were. I had no idea the level that fear was operating in my life. I like Chuck Chamberlain's description. His fear is a prayer for what you don't want. And worry is a prayer to yourself. So don't you find in the room that it's the 2nd, 3rd, 4th time you go through the 4th and 5th step that you start to get a deeper cut at it? You start to get, later on, you're not even talking about your drinking. You're not talking about the lost job. You're not talking about the early consequences when you get into it. But the first 2 years of our lives, most of us, especially if we're younger, I mean, we're out trying to put our lives back together. And it's extraordinary the progress that people make in the first 2 years of sobriety. But I find that that the real deepening and the real change in our lives come when we kind of stop making life transactional. In the first 2 years, most of us, our lives are transactional. I got to deal with the IRS, I got to deal with my job, I got to get my marriage back, got to get back in the house, I got to get my bills paid, and even though we know that there's a bigger picture and we know that you're supposed to have God in your life, there's this, I got to get my life together. And we are transactional. I mean, we are looking for what do I have to do? I mean, if I get asked that question, I want to say, you don't have to do a goddamn thing. You need to alter who you be. As long as you are the doing machine, you're in control. And as long as you're in control, you are severely limited where you can go. And when you start to have a real caution about your own thinking, and that doesn't happen immediately. You are, first of all, you think your thinking is better than anybody else's because you have all the secrets. You know where the bodies are buried. They're giving you advice with 10% of the information. And God bless them, they're trying, but I mean, they just, And And it isn't until you start to shed some of those secrets, it isn't until you start to, and not see them just by the consequences, to start to understand the causes and conditions of the issues that are going on in your life. Which is the wisdom. You can't teach wisdom. You can learn it, but you can't teach it. It's something that happens. It's not something we do. And we keep asking, what do I do? Because we think that that's going to get me the secret. That's going to give me the tip. That's going to give me the thing that I need to get to where I'm going. And this is a lifetime process. I mean, one of the, the Catholics have confession. But this is any great spiritual tradition has something like inventory and confession. And it has mentoring. And it has, I've had a spiritual advisor for, 40-some years. And it's really important to be able to have a conversation with people about what my spiritual walk is, not just, the rest of it. And maybe or maybe not just with respect to the program. It is vitally important to communicate ourselves, to fully communicate ourselves. There's a freedom in that is just extraordinary. And as you do that deeper, and as you are more willing to be able to take a look at the unworkability of your life, Sandy says, anytime I'm wrapped around the axle, anytime I have a serious problem, anytime I'm emotionally really upset, I either owe an amend or I need to forgive the person. Now, if you're like me and like many people in the room, forgiveness is not on the list very high. It's not a tool, revenge or getting even or, winning, but forgiveness, why? I'm the one that got wronged. I don't, it really seems beyond. It's like someone asking you to give money when you're short of money. That seems, counterintuitive. And that's what spirituality asks you all the time. It asks you to do something that you can't do. It asks you to do something beyond yourself. It asks you to do something without knowing the results and without knowing how, which, how would you possibly be able to do it? I mean, there is a knower inside of you that as you start to do this work, it deepens. And you have access. Our lives are so narrow when they're as defended as we are. We have boxes around them and fences around them, and we don't. And we have to get to the causes and conditions and the insight into the unworkability of our thinking. Our thinking is what controls most of what's going on. And as long as we have our intellect in charge and our ego's in charge, and our ego, you can't get rid of your ego. You need it for the trip. It's the spacesuit. But it has to become a junior partner. Thank you for sharing. Let the train go through the station. You do not have to get on every car, every train that goes through the station. You literally, it's like clouds in the sky. That's what meditation is. Meditation isn't the absence of thinking. It's letting thinking happen without becoming attached to it as we meditate. And as we start to develop that practice, we can bring that out into the world, and we can be, all of a sudden our thinking is not the only thing that's going on. Our internal dialogue is not the only thing that's going on. We are able to be with things more quietly and insightfully than we ever have. And that is the ongoing process. It is, that's what's missing in so many religions. I mean, they don't have, it's about belief. And I really think in most ways we don't care what you believe. We want to know what your experience is. We want you to have some experience with the God of your understanding. We don't care what you call it. We don't care. you know. But we want you need that for the trip. If you don't have that, you are using intellect and ego. If you don't have a spiritual dimension, your toolkit is limited to intellect and ego. Intellect and ego cannot do what we're talking about. And the fourth step, you know, I mean, Jack, you know, got into a lot of some details. But he's also a real practitioner. It's a non-bullshit sort of thing. It isn't, you know, he's a journeyman plumber. He's not just a guy who's talking to you about the technicality of, you know, what tool you bring to what job and you go do this. You can very easily, by listening to his story and seeing who he is a practitioner. And that is the thing that we become over a period of time. And we become less afraid and more insightful, and we start to get our hands on the knobs and dials. We are not as afraid to look at our marriage. We are not as afraid to, you know, to have that conversation with our spouses. Most of us are controllers. You know, I love what I was talking about in marriage. I've been married 58 years. I have a fabulous wife. She's one of the easiest people to be married to that you could possibly imagine. She's quite a lady. But in many ways, there was all sorts of things about myself I did not want my wife to know. Okay. As far as relationship goes, guys are in grade school. Women are in the master's program at Yale with respect to relationship. The things you do not want them to know, they absolutely know 50 to 80% of what you don't want them to know. And I've been trying to help you with it for the last 15 years. And I mean, that is absolutely not, you know, it's just the way it is. I mean, is there insight into relationship? I mean, they raised, you know, little monsters and taught them how not to kill people for ice cream cones. I mean, it is, you know, it is, they've been dealing with ego and understanding that process so much longer, and we're, you know, Luddites. We you know, we're dealing with the fact that we have turds in the ground. We're wondering, where did those come from? You know? It's just amazing. But we catch up. And people say you're lucky with the marriage you have. I am. But I love that when the man was talking about, most of us approach relationships. So when an event happens, my wife does not want to go on the trip. My wife does not, you know, want to have sex on the night out, whatever the hell it is. And then I take that fact and I put it out there and I take a look at it and I say, you know, does that make her the one, or does it make her less the one? Until you decide, until you make her the one, you're going to be looking at every episode that's going on in your relationship as whether I should continue this or not. You're going to be evaluating her and it as you go along. When you stop that evaluation, I like what Bill Dixon, Frank Milo's sponsor, said. You know, if I like you, you almost can't do anything wrong. And if I don't like you, you can't do anything right. And it is in the marriage. I love my wife. It isn't a matter of right and wrong. It's just what it is. And we can be with each other without this evaluating. The evaluator is the killer of relationships. And we're afraid that, you know, if I really make her the one, I could be wrong. You know, I mean, people are not perfectly matched. You know, I mean, there isn't just one person in the world for you. What makes it a perfect match is deciding she's the one. And you have to give up some of the evaluation, some of the judgment, some of the control in that process. But that when you start doing that in relationship, how many people in the room are grandparents? Okay, so a third of the room, maybe, something like that. the extraordinarily different way we look at our grandchildren as opposed to how we see our children is just extraordinary. The pain and the judgment and the assessment and the sense of responsibility that we brought to the process of trying to raise kids and then expecting them to obey, you know. I mean, it is just, and you look at these grandchildren and all you want to do is love them. And you see how bright they are, and you see how, you know, I saw how dumb my kids were. You know, I did. I just kept on, you know. I mean, it's just extraordinary how many things in life I didn't know how to do, and I thought not knowing, I had to pretend I knew how to do almost everything I was in front of. And then you know, so it is, and that's the change I want us to go through. That's the change I want me to go through with my relationship with you. I don't want to evaluate. You know, it isn't like I throw my brain away. It isn't like I don't see that there are issues and there aren't, you know, God bless Rick. I mean, you know, how could you not know there's issues? It's all right. But I no longer want to be that guy. I don't want to be correct. I don't want to be right. I want to be related. I want to be in the presence of love. What we're moving towards, guys, is love. And what we're trying to do, the process of finding God, the process of finding love, is subtraction, not addition. The mind and ego wants to add. The spirit wants to subtract. It wants to remove what's in the way. And that's the magic of our program. The magic of the program says, you don't have to become someone else. We're going to take you home. We're going to take you to who you have always been, and we're going to remove what's in the way. And when you find who you have always been, there's nothing to do. There is nothing to do. It is, and be careful when we go through this process of inventory that it's not neurotic, that it's not judgmental. It's hard at first, and especially when there's a lot of secrets. But over a period of time, you start to love people who have problems. Okay? And you start to forgive yourself in the process of forgiving others. And forgiveness is, or compassion. If you don't have forgiveness and compassion in the process of dealing with yourself and dealing with your life, you're going to turn the knife on yourself. I mean, if you're a hard ass, if you're a Green Beret member of Alcoholics Anonymous and you're behavior-oriented and you're process-oriented, and that's what it is. This is what you do. Anytime you got a problem, go call on someone. You know, well, that's, you know, that's part of it, but it ain't all of it. We don't give advice. Oh, bullshit. You know. I mean, we're attracted to each other because we're examples to each other. We're mirrors to each other. The whole program is a house of mirrors. We keep trying to avoid it. We keep pulling out our gun and shooting the mirrors out. But life is a house of mirrors. Your children are mirrors. When you're about to strike a child and you look at the child's face, you know, that moment. When you're saying something to your wife, that moment. A house of mirrors. And we did, for a long time, we didn't look and we didn't see. And now, you know, most of us can see. This fourth step and fifth step, do not get in it neurotically. Do not get in it technically. I like the technicalness. I like the structure. Okay? And I think that offers us an opportunity for completeness. It is really important. But as you go through, it's a dance. You know, not everybody, you know, and some people are more open than others. Some people are old souls, and from the first time you sit down with them, you know, there's just not many barriers, and other people are so defended that they just don't get it. I'm working with a guy right now that is, you know, just unbelievably defended. And it's it's like it's impossible. When it talks about constitutionally incapable of being honest with yourself, that's what it feels like. And the only thing you have to bring to the party is, will they listen to you? And he may listen occasionally, but he doesn't hear. And it's like talking to a wall. It is disempowering. So this is a sacred process. This is a process, and it's ongoing. You don't get it done the first time through, but you get a layer. You get some removal. You get some forgiveness. Okay? And the next time in, you got a different set of issues that you're dealing with. You're not dealing with the drinking, and you get on. And little by slowly over a period of time, you start to get down to the causes and conditions. And they're hard to take a look at, and depending upon how much work you do and how many conversations you have, and that's why working with other people is so important, is because you get yourself handed to yourself in the process of working with other people. And going to meetings. I mean, how many times do you hear that? You hear someone in the meeting say something that you've never heard before, and it's just pow. Well, if you've never heard it before, how do you know that you just heard something that's almost life-changing for you? Because your knower knows. And that's what happens to us little by slowly. Pow, pow, pow. That's what happens. That opportunity is available here. There's people in this room with serious secrets that are going to have serious consequences on their lives. And they're scared, and they don't trust, and they, maybe at this moment aren't ready. But I'm telling you that letting go and taking the risk that we all take is one of the most important. Until you take that, you can't own it. And until you own it, you can't get it into your consciousness. It's a rock in the creek, and the water eddies around it. We bury stuff, and we're not dealing with it, and, the goal of life is to get the rocks out of the creek so that the creek moves smoothly. And little by slowly, that's what we do over a period of time. And it's amazing how clear you can make that process. And when that process is clear, you are less defended. You are less in your mind. You are less mind-bound. You are freer to be able to be with what's going on. You're not always wondering who knows what. Okay? The need to know. What do they know? Okay? I mean, that's gone. So that the fourth and fifth step are sacred. And they are, I think we have that element better than any faith tradition that I'm familiar with. And it is one of the great treasures that we have. And we don't hurt each other with it. That's what the other thing that I really like about it. I grew up in a process, ever since I found masturbation and drinking, I became kind of an associate member of the Catholic Church. I had to go to confession daily to go to daily Mass and Communion. I wasn't going to class, but I was going to daily. And but there's way too much attention to sin in the church that I love and that I still am active in as a young man. It's not like that today. I mean, if you really go talk to the priests today, it's not like that today. But we do that better than anybody, any place, deeper. This isn't just a laundry list to go on and tell someone to, get a certain result of the confession. This is the real deal. This is exposing yourself in an unprotected, sacred way. And I don't know anybody who has gone through this process and been hurt. Someone may have broken a confidence, and if that happens, that's not cool. But I just have heard almost no stories in Alcoholics Anonymous of confidences and of anybody being hurt and doing 4 and 5 pass.
I just want to touch briefly on the fear and the conduct inventory. You know, this is the most important sentence to me on page 68. You know, we talk about fear because it's the fabric of our existence when we walk in the doors. That lessens, I promise you. And it took me a long time to see this sentence on page 68. It says, we are in the world to play the role he assigns, capital H. When I'm playing the role he is assigned, there is no fear. You know, and most of the time we see that in the rearview mirror. Most of the time we see that after we walk through it. You know, occasionally we're in the middle of it and somebody will share their experience. That's more information than you wanted, huh? But I think that we're on a different basis now. We're on the basis of trusting and relying upon God. You know, and on that basis, I'm playing the role he assigned. And there's a lot of ways to get there. There's some pretty direct questions in the book. And, you know, self-reliance, how's that going for you? That's the journey here, you know, self-reliance. And we come here and it is a different basis. But I have to go through the work. I have to do the fear inventory. You know, I have guys come up to me all the time and say, I'm terrified. And we walk through this page. And at the end, the fear prayer, we ask him to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be, not do. You know, when I'm in fear, I want to do something. And generally, it's not pray. You know, I want to fix it. I want to eliminate the threat. That's how we roll. And am I playing the role he assigned? And that's one of God's kids, trying to help another kid. And in that place, it goes away. You know, I have guys, we talk about the sex inventory. You know, what it says in here, we reviewed our conduct over years past. I have guys all the time, well, how does porn fit into the inventory? I know you do. You were second on the list of guys I was going to ask to sponsor me. The reality is if you're doing it, it's your conduct. Put it in here. Run it through those questions. You know, run it through the process, that sacred process that Bob was just talking about. Invite God into the conversation. You know, I can't tell you how many times I've called Bob with the problem du jour. And he said, well, where's God in all that? And it's all he needed to say. That's it. He didn't need to say anything else. He didn't give me directions on 15 different things to do. He knows that I know what that means. He knows that I have an experience of God. And if you're new here and you have a God of your understanding, that's great. If you do the work we're talking about, you will have a God of your experience. And the minute you have a God of your experience, nobody can touch it. It's real. And, you know, so whatever it is that you're doing falls under my conduct. You know, and if it's got me wrapped around the axle one more time, run it through the questions in the conduct inventory. Ask God to help you mold an ideal that's fitting, that's helpful, that's useful to the world around you. And I promise you, if you do those things, something will shift. And I can say that because it's happened to me. You know, I've been married, I've been with my wife for 45 years. One of my greatest character defects that's become an asset in God's hands is my stalking skills. That's why we've been together for 45 years. And when her phone rings, the whole family laughs their asses off. I'm not there, but I've heard about it. When I call my wife, her phone's ringtone is a train whistle. Because I have taken her hostage with my good ideas, I can't tell you how many times. She's an active member of Al-Anon, and I wish I had the depth she has. The reality is that I was going through this process with my sponsor at some point. And he said to me when we were doing the fifth step, he said, Jack, here's the deal. You can't tell your wife everything. And I was pissed. I started thinking about it. Well, she's my wife. I'm supposed to tell her everything. And I went home and I talked to Steph about it. I said, Don told me I shouldn't tell you everything. And Don used the example that I'll go on vacation with her and I'm buying property and moving to wherever I'm enjoying myself, because that's how I roll, just uplifting her whole life. And it creates fear for her. And I told her, I said, Don told me I shouldn't tell you everything. You know what her response was? Thank you, Don. Because I'm a stream of consciousness guy. If it feels good, we're all doing it forever. That's how I feel. That's what we're doing forever.
That's what got me jacking off in public.
Yeah. I'm glad you went to the restroom. Number one. And the reality is my ego gets tempered, my self-centeredness gets tempered, and I actually consider what I'm telling my wife. Is it going to hurt her? Is it good for the whole family? The traditions come into it. That conversation, is it really and truly in the interest of common welfare, or is it just Jack? And those things come about as we go through this work. Can I go to step 6?
Yes.
Step 6 and 7 for me for a long time were the flyby steps. And I was on step 7 at one point, and I was sponsored by a guy by the name of Don Maloney, who was my Ebby. He was my guy. And he was the perfect guy for me. And I'm on step 7, and Don was the kind of guy where if we were going through the work, if he saw me, if he walked in a room and saw me, he would ask me how it's going with step 7. I'd tell him, good, Don, right on. Everything's good. God's got it all. And one day he walked in and he said, how's step 7 going? Because I've been saying the prayer. And I said, I have no idea what my job is on step 7. I can tell you that it's going well, but I don't really know anything about it. And he said, Jack, you have a job in step 7. He said, God has a job in step 7. He said, God's job is to remove your character defects and make you useful. Your job is to act like he did. And what I thought he was telling me was to act like I didn't have any character defects. That's the journey here, man. Look how great I am. My life is, I'm dying on the vine. And I'm acting like nothing's wrong. And that's what I thought he was telling me, and that is not what he was telling me. And it was a number of years before I understood what he was saying. He was saying to act as if God's the power. If you believe God's the power, if you believe that, are you going to miss your prayer and meditation in the morning? Are you going to spend time in prayer and meditation during the day? Are you going to pray regularly? Are you going to do those things? If God's the power, you're going to pay attention to the power. In step 6, we go through this process in 4 and 5, and all of a sudden I have the truth, the stock and trade. I know at a level I never knew, And It asks of us to, it asks four things. Is it objectionable? You know, the shit that you're doing that you don't like, that you don't even like. And if you don't like it, no one else does either, trust me. You don't even like it, it's objectionable. Is it objectionable to you? Can you fix it? How's that going? How long have you tried to fix that thing that's just got you hooked? To no avail. You can't get it done. Are you willing to let God? Are you? It's the only thing that works. And here's the hardest part. Are you willing to let God any way God sees fit? That's the tough one. I've got a plan. I've always got a plan. Am I willing to go with God's plan? You know, in 6 and 7, I hear all the time, you know, do you have a list of character defects? Have you written down your character defects? Have you seen your character defects? I can tell you if you have a list of your character defects, it's probably not all of them. I've never been asked to list my character defects. What it tells me is I can't fix it. I can't fix it. Doesn't matter if I know it. How long did you know you probably shouldn't take that drink? Standing there stone cold sober and you take the drink. I can't fix it. And if you're like me, you think you got to get good to get God. Pray the prayer. Read the prayer in the 7th step. It says, God, take all of me, good and bad.
He doesn't mean it.
He does. But I'm that guy. I'm the guy that doesn't think he means it. I think I got to get good to get God. The cool thing about Alcoholics Anonymous is it meets us right where we are. Every single time. It meets us right where we are. I don't have to get good to get God. I got to start acting differently. You know, but me trying to work on my self-centeredness, me trying to work on my... If it worked that way, it'd be in a self-help book. What it is I can't help myself book. I can't fix it. Does it help to have the awareness, the truth of the stock and trade? Absolutely. Absolutely, it does. But the reality is if I sat here and listed my character defects, I can tell you that there are times where self-centeredness would never hit it. And that's the root of my trouble. Everything stems from that. You know, Chuck C., there's one problem that encompasses all problems. Conscious separation from. That's my self-centeredness. My self-centeredness builds a wall around me, and all I'm thinking about inside those walls is me. And what the 7-step prayer asks us to do is go to God. He's the power. You know, he's got the goods, man. And yet we're the ones that work the steps in moderation. You know, the reality is it's the real deal. And what I know today is that place I get to, that decision I made in 3. The truth of that decision is the prayer in step 7 is an affirmation of that decision. Really? You're going to let God do it all? What's my job? My job is to be nice to you. My job is to be of service to you. My job is to be inconvenienced by your phone call. And it's the good stuff. You know, that's what it says. It says remove every single thing in the way of my usefulness to you. not what's inconvenient to Jack. I was a fireman for 18 years. I was a captain of the station up in Thomasville and by the ranch. And when you first join the fire department, they sign you up to go to a fire academy. And the best thing about the fire academy is there's a live burn building. If you're a fireman, you like shit burning. And we showed up to the fire academy, and I'm sitting on a hilltop. It was a below-ground structure, and there was a driveway that went down the hill, and there were hills on both sides, and all the crews from all the different departments from all over western Colorado were sitting up there waiting for their turn in the burn building. And we were joking and doing what we do and having a good time watching two crews go into the burn building. And some of them would come out high-fiving each other and good time. Other guys would come out and they'd be ragged and their face shields would be melted down around their helmets, and you'd see burn marks on their face where they didn't get their bunker gear on right and shit. And the longer we watched, the more concerned I got, It's like, well, fire is hot. And they called our number, and we went into the burn building. There's two old-time firemen, the veterans, the journeymen, standing on the side operating the burn building. And they set us up, and we got set up, and they fired up the fire. I know what to do. You put the wet stuff on the hot stuff, right? And they fired up, and I opened the hose and spray the fire, and the guy shuts everything down. He said, stand down, and we're all down on the ground. And when I put the water on the fire, that whole place changed. Because if you do a direct attack on fire, it lets off steam, and the steam rolls up into the heat layer at the ceiling, and it just expands, and it comes down around your ears. And it'll kill you. It's 1,800 degrees. And that's how I am with my character defects. I'm trying to direct attack. And I can tell you that character defects do not respond to a direct attack by Jack. That is my experience. And yet I try. I'm going to be nicer. I'm not going to be such an asshole in the meeting. And what the old guys teach you is that in order for you to put the fire out, you got to treat the atmosphere in the room. And they tell you, they say, I know it's counterintuitive, but don't put the water on the fire at first. They say you got to spray the ceiling, and you got to cool the heat above, and then you got to wash the wall above the fire, and you do a Z pattern, and at the end you come down across the fire. By the time you get done with the ceiling and the wall, generally the fire's out because you've taken care of the atmosphere in the room. And the best atmosphere treatment to get rid of my character defects is 8 through 12. It changes the atmosphere of my life. It changes everything. When I understand that I can't fix it, I don't even need to be paying attention to it. I need to be paying attention to this over here. And it's counterintuitive. I think it should be a direct attack on my character defects. When in step 6, the truth is I've been trying to fix these things for decades. The same shit for decades to no avail. And what the program teaches us, what the spiritual journey teaches us, is that we treat the atmosphere of our life and the fires go out. Our character defects fall away. And that's been my experience here. I just continue on this journey. How many guys in here, and I know the answer to this, how many guys in here have completed all 12 steps with a sponsor? You can't complete them. It's impossible. And it's funny because I ask that question a lot when I'm doing these things. I was down in Mexico with Lamb was there, and Steve Lee was there, and a bunch of guys were down there. And I asked that question when I spoke on whatever night it was. And Steve Lee was doing a workshop the next day, and he said to everybody, he said, how many people thought that was a bullshit question Jack asked last night? Jewel thinks it's a bullshit question. But that's how we get lulled into that sense of I'm done. That's how I get lulled into that sense of, what's next? I got news for you. There's nothing next. This is it. This is what we got. This is the whole deal. And the good thing is, I need it. I need it today more than I needed it when I walked in, because I got this bigger life today. I have more people that count on me. I have more people that I'm in relation to. I have these relationships that have become just bedrock in my life. How do I show up for them on a daily basis and not be that self-centered, egotistical asshole? Tim's saying, yeah, I don't know. The reality is that we do this stuff and we continue to do it. It's not one and done. It's not we get the diploma. And it's the good news, because there's always more. And I like more. Do you like more? There's always more. I'm done for a minute.
Bob, I'll call it. Sometimes in our sharing, we forget that we are not, we have a lot of sobriety. And, I was going to mention, I put the piece of candy. Remember when Charlie Parker used to spike the hot sauce at the retreat?
Yeah,
Charlie
psychopathic.
Pour very hot sauce in the thing, and people would burn themselves with it.
And we laugh.
I just bring that up because Billy Cockrell has fudge, and Billy puts laxative in his fudge. It's different. It's different than Charlie, but I just want to bring that up. But we've been sober a long time. We sponsor a lot of guys who give a lot of talks, go a lot of places. That's not the model for Alcoholics Anonymous. It's an example, and it's open to anybody who wants to travel that route. But most of us are supposed to get sober and stay married, raise our kids, do family, go to 2-3 meetings a week, sponsor some people. But you can become a practitioner of the program without being the super guy, without sponsoring a dozen people, you can be a practitioner. You can, everybody should have the experience of sponsoring 1 or 2 people. It is an extraordinary experience. Everybody should have the experience of going through the steps with another, with yourself, with your sponsor. It's a life-changing proposition. 6 and 7 are, I think if I were to ask the people in the room, how important was 6 and 7 to you the first couple of years, that most of us would say not very. They needed 12 steps and they threw those 2 in. My wife always thought they were filler steps. And, you get done taking your 5th step and, then you get quiet for an hour if you do the instructions, and then it says, are you entirely ready to have God remove the defects of character? Sure. Humbly ask him, okay. I mean, it's a no-brainer. Intellectually, I just talked about how messed up part of my life was. I remember, so we started a conference called Gopher State Conference in Minnesota, and for the first 5 years, there were about 4 or 5 people we just loved, Chamberlain being one of them. And Chamberlain would hold court up in his room. There'd be like 20 of us sitting on the living room floor, listening to Chuck. and I'm down at Chuck's feet. And he looks at me and he says, son, you're not going anywhere. He said, you already are everything you're ever going to be. He says, I can tell you're a little disappointed in that. I said, hell, I don't understand it, but it's exactly true. We're going to bring you home. We're going to bring you to who you have always been. There's nothing missing. There is nothing missing. You are not flawed in the way that your ego tells you that you're flawed. When we talk about the defects of character, I don't know, a list, I don't know that I've ever made a complete list of my defects of character. I've had a tendency to be, too hard on myself. But I'll tell you, at 7 or 8 years of sobriety, when I had the second surrender, it was clear to me that I, on my own, did not have the power to effectively work the steps in my life. That I needed a God in my life. Okay, not like a belief. It's like a partnership, And I'm lucky because I like partnership. I've been married a long time, been partnered with my initial partner for 53 years in the business. I lived in the same city all my life. I mean, it's like a ghetto. I mean, I run into people that I went to grade school with all the time. My high school friends I'm still close with, and it's cool. When Jack talked about as you walk through life, so first of all, what's there to do? Chop wood and carry water. That's what the Eastern people say. What does that mean? It means as you live your life, life will present you with everything you need to become enlightened. Every opportunity, every problem you have, every relationship you have, you select the people without even knowing it. You select the process that your soul needs to go through to get cleaned out. And yet the ego is, just fighting that at every possible level, trying to control it. When those are the opportunities that are going to let you deal with the defects of character and to deal with your personality over a period of time. When you stop complaining, when you stop getting so upset you can't deal with what's in front of you, and you start being with what's in front of you, you will then start to gain the wisdom that's in that process. And that's what the program of Alcoholics Anonymous does. It allows us to be in front of what's there. Not run away. Not get so pissed off we can't think. Not strike someone. Not lie. Just to be able to be with it. Doesn't always mean that it's easy. Life is, the idea that we are moving away from problems, moving away from pain into pleasure, doesn't work. There's no avoidance of the ups and downs of life. No one's exempt from life. I got a couple of people that are going through some really, really tough stuff right now. It's just they're turning the barrel. It's your turn in the barrel and we're watching you. And you can see the dignity with which some of these people are walking through the cancer and the divorce and the loss of business and the loss of a career or whatever the hell's going on. And it's a dignity that we get in the program. We can be with whatever the hell's going on. We don't have to change it. We don't have to like it. But we can be with it. And we can learn what there is to learn, because if you don't learn it, you're going to keep having that event happen in your life over and over and over again. You are not broken. You are not so flawed. We're just trying to bring each other home. And no one gets home until everybody gets home. I mean, we're on when it talks about the road of less travel, when it talks about, when we trudge the road of happy destiny, it doesn't say when we get to the destination. It says as we travel the road. And that's what we are. We're fellow travelers. And some of us are more experienced and we can help the people that are newer at the process. I did not believe 6 and 7 for almost 8 years in Alcoholics Anonymous. I intellectually believed it. I knew you had to get ready. I knew you had to have God to remove my defects of character. I did not understand it at an effective level until I had my second surrender. And in my second surrender, I realized I could not do it, what Jack was talking about. And when you really get that, you start to rely all the more on your sponsor, on your spiritual director, on your running buddies. You know, we support each other. I mean, it is, we're in this together. I mean, it's like, I went to a military school, and it's like your company, it's like your squad, it's like your platoon. I mean, you're going to battle together. And I'm surrounded by guys, and I don't want to disappoint them. I mean, that's part of the village, it's part of the mirror sort of thing. The good news is, we've got the path, we've got the instructions. I mean, it is not, and I worry sometimes that we talk about the instructions like, you really have to just do your best. That's all you got to do. Stay here, do your best, and stay active. And if you start walking through that, your defects of character will fall off. All of a sudden, you realize, I haven't done that in 6 months. They fall off because they no longer apply to who you are as a man. They just aren't necessary to the path, and they're in the way of the path. And they fall off without, most of the major changes I've had in my life did not come from effort. They just fell off. And you could say that you outgrow them, I guess in some ways that's apropos. But that's the process. It is. So Tony DeMello, he talks about you can't learn wisdom. Wisdom happens, wisdom is unhappened. And that is what happens in the process of doing the deal. They fall off. They no longer are appropriate to who you have allowed me to become in my life. And so it isn't hard. I mean, it's, we've been given the answer. It's extraordinary that we have so many places when you're really in trouble, your mind wants to know what to do. In AA, there's always an answer for that. We talk about service, and that's vitally important. And we talk about the steps. The steps are the program. Do the steps to the best of your ability. Get in the middle. Go to the meetings. And as you walk, you just will become a better man. And that ultimately is the higher cause. What kind of a man do you want to be? Who do you want to be in the business of your own life? And that is, we don't ask that question enough. We got too much attention on, the 20 grand that I owe. We got too much attention on, my kid just got kicked out of school, or, whatever it is. And you got to deal with all those things. You're not exempt. But the ultimate thing is what kind of a man do you want to be in that process? What do you want to do with that kid that just got kicked out of school? You want to bat him around a little bit? You want to yell at him? What do you want to do? And it is maybe all of the above. But the fact is it's about love. And when I had all those issues with parenting, when I was a violent and insufficient parent, the reason was I didn't want the problems. I wanted an immediate resolution to the problems. My kid got kicked out of school, or whatever, got into a fight, or whatever the hell it was. I wanted it over. I didn't have the patience, and I didn't have the humility. I didn't have to be able to be in front of it. I couldn't be in front of it. I wanted it changed now. It's not like that. People aren't like that. They don't change now. The problems with your children aren't any different than the problems you had going through it. Do you have any understanding of that? I mean, I have to somehow get enough humility and enough honesty and enough insight to be able to be in front of what's happening, to be able to be in front of life. And if you do that, you're going to be fine. This is a roadmap. This is the treasure. This is the menu. You can starve to death eating the menu. So it isn't just the words. The words will not get you there. You really have to somehow get to the dinner to go do that. 6 and 7 are integral. If I ask anybody in the room with 10 years and more, how important are 6 and 7 now? I think they'd say 2, 3, 4 times as important as they were when I was early in the process. That's because I was transactional. And as you move from being transactional to internal, it changes the whole viewpoint. And that's what we need. As soon as we start to be internal, you start to get some sort of sense of a higher power, you get some sort of sense of spirit, and you've got access to the mainframe. You've got access to the knower. And life takes on a different dimension, and you have a depth that you never had before. We done?
Yes, sir.
Okay.